The capture of Berlin in the spring of 1945 marked the climactic finale of World War II in Europe and symbolized the collapse of Nazi Germany. Central to this historic event was the relentless advance of the Soviet Red Army, which, after years of brutal fighting on the Eastern Front, surged westward to deliver the final blow to Hitler's regime. The Soviet march to Berlin was not only a military campaign but a moment of immense symbolic significance, a testament to the Soviet Union's sacrifice, determination, and strategic prowess. Background: the Eastern Front at a turning point. By late 1944 and early 1945, the Red Army had regained almost all Soviet territory and pushed into Eastern Europe. The massive Operation Barbarossa in the summer of 1944 had decimated German forces in the east, paving the way for a rapid Soviet advance into Poland, the Baltic states, and eventually Germany itself. The Western Allies had landed in Normandy in June 1944 and were pushing eastward, but it was the Soviets who bore the brunt of fighting against the bulk of the German Wehrmacht and SS. As 1945 began, the Red Army stood poised to strike at the heart of the Nazi state, preparing for the assault on Berlin. The Soviet High Command, led by Marshal Georgy Zhukov and Marshal Ivan Konev, devised a plan to encircle and capture Berlin. The city was heavily fortified, with Hitler's Führerbunker serving as the nerve center of a collapsing regime. Berlin was more than just a military objective. It was the capital of the Third Reich and a symbolic prize whose fall would signify the definitive end of Nazi Germany. The Battle of Berlin, a fierce and costly siege. The Soviet offensive began on April 16, 1945, with an overwhelming concentration of artillery, tanks, and infantry. The Red Army attacked from multiple directions, breaching the German defensive lines after intense urban combat. The battle was characterized by brutal house-to-house fighting. Soviet soldiers faced fanatical resistance from German troops, Volkssturm militias, and even civilians. Massive casualties. Both sides suffered heavy losses in a city reduced to ruins. Encirclement tactics. Soviet forces cut off the city from reinforcements and escape routes. Despite fierce German counterattacks, the Soviet forces steadily pushed forward. The fall of the Reichstag and Hitler's suicide. One of the battle's iconic moments came on April 30, 1945, when Soviet troops raised their flag over the Reichstag building, the symbolic seat of Nazi power. This event represented the collapse of the Nazi government. On the same day, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker, ending the Nazi leadership's desperate final stand. Aftermath: the end of the war in Europe. Berlin officially surrendered on May 2, 1945, followed by Germany's unconditional surrender on May 7 to 8, known as Victory in Europe Day. The Soviet victory was costly but decisive. The Red Army suffered over 80,000 killed and 280,000 wounded during the Berlin offensive alone. However, the capture of Berlin cemented the USSR's role as a dominant post-war power. Symbolism and legacy. The Soviet march to Berlin symbolized not only military victory but the immense human sacrifice endured by the USSR. Over 27 million Soviets died in the war. The battle also set the stage for the division of Germany and the beginning of the Cold War. Soviet occupation of Berlin led to decades of tension with Western allies, culminating in the Berlin airlift and the city's division into East and West. Conclusion. The Soviet march to Berlin was the final, decisive chapter in the defeat of Nazi Germany. It demonstrated the Red Army's strength, resilience, and strategic skill while marking the end of one of history's darkest regimes. The battle's legacy endures as a powerful reminder of the cost of war and the profound impact of the Soviet victory on shaping the post-war world.